You know how sometimes you wake up in the morning and the first lady puts out a statement demanding you be fired from your job? We've all been there, right? You've been there, right, Guillermo?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Jimmy Kimmel began his monologue under pressure few late-night personalities have ever experienced. A current First Lady was openly demanding his dismissal. The sitting president was publicly urging a
ABC's late-night host Jimmy Kimmel disgustingly called First Lady Melania Trump an expectant widow. This kind of rhetoric about the president, the First Lady, and his supporters is completely deranged, and it's unbelievable. The deranged lies and smears against the president, his family, his supporters have led crazy people to believe crazy things, and they are inspired to commit violence because of those words. It has
television network to remove him from the air. And the White House press secretary had gone so far as to describe his remarks as dangerous. Then Kimmel responded in a way that caught many people off guard. He offered an apology to Melania.
Sorry that you and the president and everyone in that room on Saturday went through that. I really am. Just because no one got killed doesn't mean it wasn't traumatic.
Trump. He acknowledged that the atmosphere surrounding the correspondents' dinner had been unsettling and emotionally intense, admitting that public rhetoric can sometimes cross boundaries that should never be ignored. But after that, he pivoted. Kimmel argued that if the discussion...
You want us to believe that a joke I made 3 days before this dinner had any effect on anything that happened? Well, then maybe someone should look into this psychic lady, too.
This speech tonight will be classic Donald J. Trump. It'll be funny. It'll be entertaining. There will be some shots fired tonight.
The discussion was truly about dangerous language. Attention should also be directed towards statements coming directly from the White House. He pointed to...
He had a stressful experience over the weekend, and probably every weekend is pretty stressful in that house. And also, I agree that hateful and violent rhetoric is something we should reject. I do, and I think a great place to start to dial that back would be to have a conversation with your husband about it, because...
Comments made by Carolyn Levitt, who had declared on camera that shots will be fired during the event that evening, not as a figure of speech, but plainly stated at a gathering where the president would address a packed audience. Melania Trump's response condemning violent rhetoric made no mention of that comment. There was no reference to the briefing, no acknowledgement of the phrase, and no attempt to address the seriousness of those words. Anyone raised in a time when language...
Obviously was a joke about their age difference and the look of joy we see on her face every time they're together. It was a very light roast joke about the fact that he's almost 80 and she's younger than I am. It was not, by any stretch of the definition, a call to assassination, and they...
Which carried consequences immediately understood the point Kimmel was making. The criticism only works if people ignore everything that was said leading up to the controversy. His apology itself was careful and intentional. He recognized the...
It really is a shame, because there was a time not so long ago, back in 2010, when, believe it or not, we sent our man Yaya to a Samsung promotional event in New York, where we learned that Donald Trump was a very big fan of mine.
Hi, Mr. Trump. How are you, sir? What are you doing here?
Well, I'm here to support Samsung and their 3D plasma television.
Do you want to...
But I'm also here to support Jimmy, because I love Jimmy.
Okay, you want to come? Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Yeah. Nice to meet you. You want to be in my show?
Well, you know what? I happen to love Jimmy. Let's do it.
Fear surrounding the moment, even though no lives were lost. He called for a united rejection of violent rhetoric, while also clarifying that his joke comparing Melania to an expectant widow was aimed at the couple's age gap, not intended as anything remotely threatening. Then Kimmel did something that separates a sharp comic from someone simply...
So wrote this: I am no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I was waiting for you to read that because I knew you would, because you're horrible people. Horrible people. Yeah, he did write that. I'm not a rapist. I didn't rape anybody.
Do you think he was referring to you?
Excuse me.
You know,
you should be ashamed of yourself reading that, because I'm not any of those things.
Mr. President,
and
these are the gunman's words.
Excuse me. You shouldn't be reading that on 60 Minutes. You're a disgrace. But go ahead. Let's finish the interview.
The other thing that he wrote in the
Chasing headlines. He unpacked the joke completely. He provided context, explained the sarcasm behind it, and argued that a punchline about the age difference between an older husband and younger wife could not honestly be interpreted as incitement by anyone approaching it fairly. After a short pause, encouraging viewers to subscribe, Kimmel returned to the piece of the story he believed had been ignored. Less than 24 hours after Donald Trump publicly called for unity and complimented the press, he appeared alongside Norah O'Donnell on 60 Minutes. Within moments, the tone changed dramatically. He began criticizing the interviewer, brushing aside difficult questions, and reasserting his own version of events. That brief stretch of calm between Trump and the media disappeared almost immediately. By the following night, the attacks had resumed, with journalists once again being targeted and calls growing louder for consequences against anyone who challenged him. And suddenly, that earlier phrase, "shots will be fired," took on greater significance. It had been used as promotion for a speech designed to attack and confront the media, framing the entire evening like a political battlefield. At the time, almost nobody in the room reacted. The wording had become so familiar that it barely drew attention, even though it was deeply unusual and undeniably reckless. That was the contrast Kimmel focused on. One side delivered a joke centered on age differences, while the other used rhetoric from an official podium that echoed language tied to real-world threats. And that is what made the apology so striking. Kimmel provided exactly what critics claimed they wanted: accountability, empathy, and acknowledgement. Then he widened the conversation and asked the more uncomfortable question: was the outrage genuinely about harmful rhetoric, or was it really about controlling who is allowed to speak? Because if lowering the temperature had truly been the goal, the conversation would have begun inside the White House itself. It would have confronted every example of language that intensifies division and fuels hostility.